You're here. Welcome to the Masterminding Success podcast. They say if you want to be successful in business and in life, then surround yourself with successful people. So pull up a seat. The mastermind is about to begin.
Hey, glad you could join us for another episode of the Masterminding Success podcast. We're your hosts, Keith Wheeler
and Nuria Colby.
And what are we talking about today, Nuria?
Today is a really good topic again, and it's okay to fail. So what do you think about that, Keith?
No, there's so much negativity that comes just in life, when it comes to fail and that feel of failure. And, I truly believe, and it sounds cliche, but, it's with the failures that you learn, and that, you learn how to do things differently, better, more efficiently, or whatever. So I think that one reason why people don't start in online business is because they're afraid they're going to fail.
So true.
And so I think going in with a mindset that it's okay, almost to the point where you're going to fail, like just accept it. It's going to happen. And it's what you do from that, where you go from there, that really is going to define your business.
Definitely. That's very, very true. And I think when I think of myself, I always think that I'm now the result of my many failures. So it's not such a bad thing, because the way I think about failure now is I think of it as a learning experience. Whenever you fail,
right,
there is definitely a lesson that you can learn, and why you failed and what you could have done differently. And if you fail lots of times, then you have a lot of lessons under your belt. And that's not always a bad thing. I've failed plenty of times. And I think that the reason I'm successful now is because I've learned my lessons. And this wouldn't have happened at an earlier time because I hadn't learned my lessons. I can see that now. And I think it's really important to think that it's okay to fail. Whenever I do something now, I don't worry about failure anymore. Part of that is because I've got backup. I'm secure now, and I don't have that fear that if I don't succeed, what do I do then? So I'm a little bit more protected now in that sense. So that may have something to do with it. But I think that if you don't have that fear, it really helps, so because then you just look at it as, what can I learn from the next thing that I'm going to do? And usually it turns out okay. And if it doesn't, it really doesn't matter. There's always the next thing, or there's always something else that you can do. It does help to have some backup and to have some security, so that you can, if you put all your eggs in one basket and you do something that you really need to not fail, otherwise you're in trouble, then that's a problem, I think. But other than that, I think what you said earlier is absolutely correct. That you have to not be afraid of failure at all. Do you feel afraid of failure now, Keith? I imagine not so much now.
No, I guess it's all on how you approach it. There are times that, especially if I'm going into a new area of my business that's unknown, there's always going to be a little bit of that fear, a little bit of that apprehension, I guess is probably a better way to put it. Because to me, the difference is apprehension is, I'm reluctant, but I'm still going to go for it. Whereas fear, a lot of times, can be debilitating and just like lock you up and you just don't do anything. And I think the worst thing you can do for your business, regardless of what type of business it is do nothing, And so there are times that I might get, a little bit of fear or apprehension that what I'm going to do isn't going to be, quote, successful. But I don't let that stop me, because it really, like I said, it comes down to, how am I going to react if it does fail? And a lot of times, I'll already have a backup plan. So if this, so it's more like, it's very hard to be afraid of something if you're already prepared for it. Yeah. So preparing for, okay, if this works out, great, this is what I'm going to do. If this doesn't work out, this is how I can pivot. And again, just learning from, what worked and what didn't work, whether it's, a new type of book you're going to publish, or a new revenue stream that you're going to try out, whatever it may be. You know, it's not necessarily, I don't want to say it's a negative if you're afraid. It's just how you treat that fear. You know, if you do let it, debilitate you and you don't try, because you can never, the thing about failure is you're still learning. But if you don't try, then you can never succeed or fail. And therefore you cannot learn.
Absolutely.
And so it really comes down to just, fighting that fear, if you will, and seeing, okay, even though I'm a little apprehensive and I'm worried, I'm going to push through it anyway.
Yeah. And you just said something that really struck a chord with me when you said that, as long as it doesn't stop you from doing something, because I find that fear is paralyzing. When you are fearful, you feel paralyzed. And I know that feeling really well, because I've had that many times in the past. And I think that as long as, if you feel paralyzed, what is the best thing you can do to not feel like that? And that is to take action. That's the only thing that you can do. So I think as long as you take action and you try and unparalyze yourself, I don't know, it's the only thing you can do really when you're fearful. And as long as you take action, and then as long as also you think it's okay to fail, what is the worst thing that can happen if you fail? I mean, we get that question a lot, don't we? When people say, I haven't started yet because, what if I fail? And we always say, well, if you haven't started, you will never know. And, you've already failed if you haven't started.
Right.
So that is, to me, the thing about failure, is it's not so much the failure that I'm afraid of, it's that fear that I don't like, because it's so paralyzing and it stops me from doing things. But I've learned to now act against that and to stop that by taking action regardless. That's the only way, really. I can't think of any other strategies you could have. Have you got some tips on how to overcome that?
No, it really seems like it's less fear of failure and more a fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
It's like it's not so much that people are afraid that they're going to fail. It's, I don't know what's going to if I'm going to fail, what's going to happen? Like, what's the worst that can happen? All that kind of mentality. And it's really just, if you think about it, really the fear of the unknown. It's and sometimes it could be the fear of success, which we could do a whole nother podcast on.
Yes.
but I mean, I really don't have any secret sauce or anything like that. I mean, it really just comes down to taking action. It doesn't necessarily have to be, like an extreme. You could take action in little ways. Like, for example,
action, for example.
Like for example, do I suggest that you quit your regular job and jump into this new niche? Probably not. No. Because the results of a failure could be more catastrophic than if you're just doing it as a side gig. If you're doing it as a side business and it doesn't succeed, it doesn't succeed the way you want. And that's another episode we covered, is, what, defining success. Being successful to you is maybe different than being successful to me.
Yeah.
And then conversely, the failure is different.
Define failure.
Right. So, because it's like, if I'm going into this and I see that, people are making thousands of dollars a month, and I go in and I make $100 my first month, to some, that's a success. I made money, but because of where I've got my mindset and what I've said as success, then it does look like a failure. So then again, it's all on how you react to that.
So we're going back to another podcast we did, which was the lowering your expectations.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all connected. It really is.
They just snowball.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head again there when you said that, about what is failure? How do you define that? What failure is to one person could be success to another. And that example is actually really good, because when I first started, I used to look at all the videos that people were making from, about their income reports. And I've made $5,000 this month. And I thought, if I can make 1,000, I'd be really happy, So my expectation wasn't all that high, but to me, that was success. And then you can build on that slowly.
Right.
So for some people, that might have been a failure. I don't know. To me, it was pretty good. So yeah, it depends on how you define failure as well, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, and then it's, if you define success as, $1,000 a month and you don't reach that, well, then technically you have failed. So then it goes back to what I said before, which is, okay, now what? What are you going to do with that failure? What are you going to learn from it? If you only made $100 and, let's just say book publishing, you put out one book and you made $100. Well, then just do some math. How much do you need to put out in order to get to that 1,000? That is, quote, success to you, So again, it's all on how you pivot and what you do with that knowledge, that, quote, failure.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I mean, failure to me, like I said earlier, it's a learning process as well, because, when people are starting publishing low content books or any kind of book and they don't see success and they kind of give up, and then they say, this was a waste of time. And I always really feel disheartened for them, because I think it's so not a waste of time. It's something you've learned, so many things. You've acquired lots of skills, that you didn't have before. And all of that to me is never failure. All the things, if I gave up tomorrow and I didn't do any more low content books or books, the things I've learned, I can apply to other businesses. I can apply to so many other things. I can get a job now doing, the kind of things that I've learned, the kind of skills I've picked up. So to me, it's never failure in that sense, because failure or success is not always measured in money. It can be measured in other currency, So to me, learning a skill is something that you would have to pay for. So in a way, it's it kind of makes up for it. What do you think about that? To me, that's just how I think. I know some people will disagree and it's more about the money, but I think it's everything.
I do. I think it's a culmination of all of it. I mean, I understand that, depending on what your financial situation are, that, money is going to be a huge motivator. And I get that. But you can't underestimate the skills that you've learned along the way. And, even, it's regardless of whether you're successful right out the gate or you fail or whatever. Again, it comes down to how you react from that, because what have you learned? Not just what have you learned to do right, but what have you learned to do wrong? It's I think it was an old quote that, Benjamin Franklin, it took him 10,000 or 9,999 ways not to make a light bulb, and it really was just, which led to the one way.
Yeah.
And so, and if I'm wrong with that quote, someone can correct me, but
I think it was Edison or someone. But
yeah, Thomas
right.
Edison. Yeah, that's it. Thomas Edison. Yeah, Thomas Edison. And so it's like, it doesn't matter necessarily that you fail or even how badly you fail. Exactly. It's all on what you do with that knowledge. Yeah. Because failure is still knowledge. It's knowledge on, it could be something minor that you can just tweak, which changes everything. It could be a completely different, 180 where you're in a completely different, niche, if you will, or something like that. But I think the real way, the only way you can really fail on yourself when it comes to business is to fail and then do nothing, because if you just keep doing the same, they say that insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Yeah. And so that's really the only, in my opinion, the only true way that you can fail and not help your business. Yeah. Any other way, failure can still help your business.
Absolutely.
It can help move it forward.
Yeah. I can give you a perfect example. You know, the jewelry business that I had, it wasn't exactly a failure because I'd never look at it as a failure because of all the things that I've learned, but it wasn't a great success, and it wasn't something that I could, it was paying me a wage, but it wasn't something I could scale. And that's the amount of work that was going into it. I thought it's not really worth it. And the things that I've learned from running that business are invaluable to me now. You know, they have really helped me in what I do now. And the same with the blogging side of things. When I started blogging, that didn't really pay a full-time wage either, but I learned how to build a website on WordPress, which is no small thing. And that is helping me now in the business I have now with my books. So I can build my own brand websites, and there's just so much I can do now thanks to my failures. So to me, it's, you know, and I look at that in, you know, when I try something else now, I keep thinking, well, what if it doesn't work out? And I'm not scared of it. I think, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't, but I will have learned something from it. And that's the way I look at everything now. But I do know what it feels like to have that fear of failure. And that's usually when you need it to succeed, because usually it's to do with money, because you need the income. But it could have other reasons as well. And it could be because you don't want to feel like a failure. It could be because, you know, some people set themselves goals, and if they don't reach them, they feel bad about that. So again, we're going back to the expectation side of things. But
I agree. And I mean, I'm really big on goal setting, and, you know, when it comes to failing, if you set a goal, then again, what have you learned? You've learned that goal's maybe a little too hefty. So, you know, so you kind of dial it down and set yourself a new goal for the next month or the next year or whatever. But no, I agree that it really, regardless of where you're coming from, like in these podcasts, many times you'll hear me, you know, I try, we end up talking about books because that's one thing that we know the most about, but a lot of times you'll hear me talk about restaurants or whatever, you know, physical. I used to manage a restaurant, so that's where that comes from, you know. And so from managing a restaurant, you know, I learned how to, you know, manage people, and which makes it a lot easier for me to delegate responsibility, which is a whole nother episode we can do. But also how to deal with customer service, you know, deal with angry customers, all of that. Again, like you said, with your businesses, is that even though I'm not doing that anymore, I've learned something, and I've taken that and brought it into my current business model. And so again, I don't necessarily, whether or not I still fear failure, they're going to be things that you're apprehensive about, you know. I mean, that's just human nature. And again, but I really think it's more of the fear of the unknown than a fear of actually failing, because at least failing is a result, you know, whether it's a positive result or a negative result, it's a result. It's that fear of, I don't know what the result's going to be, that a lot of people just don't try, because you know, what if, like, you know, like I said, what if it doesn't work out? What if it does? But if you don't make a decision, if you don't try, then you can't succeed, and you can't fail. So you're literally just stuck in that, you know, in that never ending loop. And so I think the biggest thing you can do for yourself is set realistic expectations. Again, a whole nother podcast that we did. And then just go for it. You know, like I said, don't, you know, I wouldn't suggest, you know, jumping in with both feet and, you know, quitting your day job and all that. But, you know, setting realistic goals, again, whole nother podcast, but, you know, just setting goals and just moving your business along, you know, taking that chance on your business, taking that chance on yourself. And then, you know, figuring out, okay, was it successful? Was it not? If it did fail, great. What did I learn from it? What can I do differently to fail a little less next time, or at least fail a little differently, so you can learn again?
Yeah, I think that has really made me think now, because I didn't, when you said is it fear of the unknown rather than fear of failure? And that made me think, because yes, that's what it is, and I hadn't thought about it that way. So that's really made me think now, what are we afraid of sometimes? I think, and I'm very good at setting myself very low goals because I like to achieve things. And if I set my goals quite low, I know I can achieve them. And then that gives me the confidence to set myself a higher goal and like that. So I think it's also about knowing yourself and adapting to how you operate and how you function, and make it easy on yourself. Don't be too harsh on yourself either, because there's enough, problems coming from somewhere else without us creating them on top of everything. So I think that, just be kind to yourself and look after yourself as well, so that that fear doesn't become overwhelming. How can you break down whatever you're going to start? Because the other thing that people always regret is not starting something. It's always years later when people said, I wish I'd done this. Same here. I wish I'd done this before, know, but I didn't know about it. So I haven't really got that, I can't blame myself too much because I didn't know. But had I known about it and had I not started straight away, I would really regret that now, if I hadn't taken action. So that's the other thing, not to have regrets is to anticipate that and to know I better start, otherwise I'm going to have regrets about it. And maybe, hopefully that's bigger than the fear of the unknown. So
I hear you. It took me 20 years to publish my first children's book. Trust me. I hear you. I know exactly what you mean. And again, it's one of those things that once you do it, whether it's publishing or whatever, and then you're like, oh, why didn't I do that 20 years ago?
That's it. Yeah.
And but again, there are things along the way that you've learned. But I really think that the worst thing you can do is just not do anything, and let that fear debilitate you. And I know that's easier said than done. Especially some people are more prone to take those chances, and some people are more apprehensive. And so for those people that are more apprehensive, I understand. Trust me, I understand how hard that is. And it sounds easy, but it's not. And I agree. And I think that goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, where it's like, just set yourself little goals. If you're talking about starting an online business, maybe your first goal is to just figure out what your niche is going to be in. You haven't actually done anything.
No.
You've done research, but you haven't spent a lot of time in creating anything, or you haven't created a business name or anything else. You're just finding out what your niche is going to be. Again, just little steps like that. And I agree with what you said. And I'm really big on setting myself realistic goals. I guess that's a good way to put it, low goals. So that way, because I like those little endorphin rushes every time you succeed something.
Exactly. Yeah.
On my phone, I actually have a little task list in my notes, and it could be something as simple as taking out the trash. Hey, I did it. And it does, it's something I can check off. But how many times have you, at least it's happened to me, where at the end of the day you're like, I don't feel like I've done anything today, and so having something written down where I could say, oh, I did that and that and that and that, it gives you that nice endorphin rush, like, oh, okay, today was successful. And so I think we talked a lot about, obviously it's okay to fail, but one thing is also enjoy those little successes. They don't necessarily, you don't need to be bringing home $10,000 a month for your day to be a success.
Maybe we should set a little challenge for people. Maybe think about something that you think was a failure of yours, and then come up with 10 things you learned from that. So that might help, because then you start looking at things in a different way. Because if you start looking at your failures and look at some of the positives that have come out of it, it might help you to overcome your fear of failure for the next time, So that would be something that you can do easily. Just take a notebook and write down 10 things and see what you can come up with. That might be a good exercise.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like I would love to hear the results of that.
Yeah,
And if
me
you don't want to
too.
share it, if you don't want to share it, hey, that's fine too. But I think it's
Mm,
still a good a good thing to do for yourself, a little good,
mm,
good little assignment just to do for
mm,
yourself and your own mentality and
mm,
changing a little bit the way you look at things and the way you
mm,
look at failure.
mm,
Because it just like we say in the in this podcast, it is okay to fail.
mm. Absolutely. And we've done it many times and we're still here.
I'm good. Well, and I'm sure I'll do it many, many more times.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a never-ending cycle of failure, success, but it's all good. It's all a learning curve to me.
No, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, like I said, the moment I stop learning something is probably when I'll stop doing this business.
Mm,
That's
so
pretty much
true.
what I've the mentality I have is
So
because
true.
I love learning something new, whether it's a
Yeah.
positive or a negative. It's helping me grow as a creator. It's help, as a business owner, and it's helping my business grow. So
Yeah. And it's more than that. I think if we stop learning, we stop living, really. It's quite, we're getting into a philosophical conversation now, but it's true. I always find something in life that I can learn from. And I always look for things that I can learn from. So yeah, it's an experience, and I love learning. Do you love learning?
oh, I do.
Yeah,
I absolutely love it.
yeah. Because some people might not be that keen on learning.
Yeah, I just want to do it. I just want to see the money. I just want to, I
Yeah.
don't want to learn anything. Well, in that case, then you probably want to just
Mm.
delegate a lot of responsibility,
Oh,
which again, a whole nother podcast.
another topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another great mastermind, Nuria. And once again, a huge thank you to all our listeners and viewers who came to tag along. If you enjoyed today's mastermind, please consider following or subscribing to the podcast and maybe go on and leave us a review and let us know what you thought. It would mean the world to us. Until next week, I'm Keith Wheeler.
And I'm Nuria Corby.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mastermind today. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and tell a friend who would enjoy it too. Your support is greatly appreciated. This has been the Masterminding Success Podcast.